Assalamu alaikum, my name is Tayyaba Nisar Khan. A very warm welcome to the newsroom on PTV World. We're going to discuss the two top stories of today, which of course firstly includes the desecration of the Holy Quran and the subsequent Islamophobic acts and the rallies held in Sweden by the Danish Sweden politician Mr. Paludan, who is of course leading this as well. And the Foreign Office has also made a statement regarding this and said that the Muslims, 1.5 billion Muslims around the world, are under a threat of Islamophobic actions as well. And the second top story, of course, is going to include the fact that justice has been tried to be served to Mr. Prayantha Kumara, who passed away, of course, in a very, very sad incident on 3rd of December earlier in the later, rather, half of this year in 2029 and of course, rather 21. And of course, we know that the trial courts had announced the death sentence on this as well. And 6 people have an announced death penalty on this case as well. And of course, about 69 people, 9 convicts, they have been awarded a life imprisonment as well. And about 72 rather convicts, they have also been given imprisonments for up to 8 years, 5 to 8 years as well. And of course, this comes as a very, very significant improvement in the court's trial by the anti-terrorism court in Gujranwala as well. And of course, the fact that we had to ensure that the bereaved family was given their due right as well, because of course, Prayantha Kumara's death was a black and a dark mark on Pakistan. Now, of course, in the next story, we're going to discuss the mob violence. The mob violence, of course, which is where 88 people have, of course, been killed by 88 people have been arrested by the police in the mob attack as well. But first, we're going to discuss the Palestinian issue, where, of course, we know that Israel has, of course, started the airstrikes as well. And now this matter will be taken up by the United Nations Security Council as well. And we'll see what happens as well, because we know that in the last year as well, the Palestinian-Israeli crisis went on to 11-day war, whereby the Israeli Defense Forces continued their atrocities against the people of Palestine as well. And later, now we're going to discuss in the next news item the mob violence, where of course we know at least 88 people, they have been arrested in India in connection with a viral video where the police of course had arrested the person who was of course in charge of making that video viral and making that video in itself, where the saffron flag was put onto the mosque, and that led to the protests, and of course that led to many arrests as well. Around 88 people have been arrested, and there were a lot of clashes as well between the Muslims and the Hindus in India as well. And of course, lastly, we're going to welcome Miss Ilhan Omar in Pakistan. She is scheduled to arrive in Pakistan today. And of course, we know Ilhan Omar is one of the first, rather the 2 Muslims who are in the Congress now. She is, of course, representing her party, a Democrat. And of course, she is from Minnesota. She has an African background as well. She is from Somalia and has been a very, very ardent advocate of the Indian illegally occupied Jammu Kashmiris, who of course are living under the atrocious rule of the brute force of India currently as well. And she's going to arrive in Pakistan, and we warmly welcome her, and this is what we're going to discuss as well. But first, let's go on to our first segment, of course, which we know is about the rise in Islamophobia. Now, the fact is that Sweden, the Scandinavian countries, which of course includes Norway, Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, they have been very actually outright about their violence against the Islamophobic actions against the Muslims as well. The violence includes the fact that they have been conducting constantly acts which are, of course, against the teachings, and they also have been against the teachings of basic ethics as well. And they also have been conducting acts that kind of also violate the Muslims themselves. What Islamophobia really is the fact that it's an action, it's a combination of a hate and fear and crime as well, and also the prejudice against the Muslims, against the Islams in itself, teachings, as well as the symbols that represent Islam as well. This includes the mosques, this includes the burning of them, this includes the vandalization of the public properties of Muslims as well, and this also includes, of course, the desecration of the Holy Quran and the discrimination against Muslims as well. And of course, we know that this has been happening not just in the Scandinavian countries, but around the world as well. And we've seen that also Pakistan has taken a very staunch stance against Islamophobia, and that has led to the combating of Islamophobia Day on March the 15th. Let's take a look at this report and come back with more.
In a world marred with xenophobic and far-right political doctrines, emergence of Islamophobia depicts most dangerous phenomenon of contemporary world. Islamophobia comprises faith-based hatred, prejudice, contempt, racism, and stereotypes such that these factors instigate hostile attitude towards Muslim community. Rallies in Sweden conducted by anti-immigration and anti-Islam group Hardline, led by Danish-Swedish politician Rasmus Paludan, who is known for Quran burnings, indicate dangerous turn in global wave of Islamophobia. In response to far-right groups' intention to burn a Quran in Örebro city in central Sweden, violent protests erupted whereby Muslim countries have strongly condemned the heinous intentions of anti-Islam group. Pakistan strongly condemned recent spate of Islamophobic acts and Foreign Office issued a statement that these mindless provocative Islamophobic incidents serve no purpose other than hurting sensitivities of over 1.5 billion Muslims living all over the world. Pakistan has been spearheading global efforts to combat Islamophobia, religious intolerance, and xenophobia, and its efforts led United Nations to adopt a landmark resolution designating March 15th as International Day to Combat Islamophobia. Amid dangerous emerging dynamics, the importance of renouncing hatred, extremism, and exclusion is more significant, and world must join hands for promoting efforts to prevent abuses against all religious groups and holy sites and foster a culture of dialogue, tolerance, and religious coexistence.
Right, you just saw the report on Islamophobia. We know that the first time this word was used in 2011 very officially was in the United Nations. Of course, we know that this was in the Alliance of Civilizations as well, and absolutely after that it was the Arab League as well, where this word was used. Of course, first of all, before going to our first guest, who is Dr. Abdul, social scientist, we're going to talk a little about what Islamophobia stands for. It's definitely a bias, that inherent bias that talks about the discrimination, the inherent discrimination against the Muslims as well. And it has been happening, of course, as earlier stated, not just in the Scandinavian countries, but around the world. In fact, around in our neighborhood as well. Now, let's welcome our first guest, Dr. Abdul, who is a social scientist for the First Top Story. Welcome to PTV World.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Abdul, of course, we know that the Scandinavian countries have had a very long history of the actions of Islamophobia against the Muslims as well, and very much discrimination as well, the fear of the hijab and the fear of the fact that, and also much discrimination against the Holy Quran in itself, the desecration of the Holy Quran, and also the fact that they try to conduct the caricatures of the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. As the MOFA has pointed out, that 1.5 billion Muslims, the second largest religion and the second largest population of this world, their sentiments are being hurt. Why is the Scandinavian country continuously conducting these activities that hurt sentiments of 1.5 billion people?
Thank you very much. This is a very sorry state of affairs when we are talking about the Scandinavian countries. The Scandinavian countries, as we know, are very high on the human index, and also indicating happiness of the people in the world. But on the other hand, there is also incidents and the occasion where there is the lacking of understanding the sensitivity of the Muslims, who are, as you told, 1.5 billion around the world. So the reason may be historical, cultural, religious, and of course political. So there are some things which are inherited among different people in the world. So that sometimes instigate and give way to those who are exploiting this situation. So I think the concept of the existence of good and evil among the people and different religions, so that is one thing which is giving way to looking the other as evil. So and this exists among all the people, among all the followers of religions, including Muslims, Christians, Jews. But I would say that taking the Holy Quran and the holy personalities of the Muslims would definitely not good act on the part of so civilized or called civilized nations.
Right. Mr. Abdul Rahman, of course, we know that the MOFA has stated, quote unquote, that the expression of right to freedom of expression or opinion, the international community should show resolve against xenophobia. There's a direct xenophobia that we've seen in these activities. It's 2022. It's no longer 18,022, right? So why is still in this century the Islamophobics Act continuing? Number one. Number two, do you see that there's a relationship between nationalism and Islamophobia?
I think in the West, they have the value of freedom and the freedom of expression, which is carrying a very high value in their ethics and their way of life. But unfortunately, they are not giving attention to the feelings of the others, for example, and also the failure of the others to place the rank and file and the concept of priority and personality to realize the others that of course, freedom of expression is a value, but along with freedom of expression, there should also be limitation not to hurt the feelings of others. So we know that the Holy Quran and the personality of the Holy Prophet, we have a lot of sensitivity when it comes these two. So it is failure on the part of us, the Muslims, who failed to make it equate, not only equate, but to bring it upper to the value of freedom and freedom of expression.
Right, right. Also, of course, we know that the freedom of expression is very important, but there's a fine line between freedom of expression and, of course, being completely out of ethics as well. But of course, we've seen that the Stramkurs party is the one, and Paludan himself, he's the one who's leading, the Swedish Danish is leading this movement against the anti-immigration, anti-Islamist sort of, rather in pro of Islam, anti-Islam and anti-immigration acts. And also not just that, we've also seen France. We've seen the new contender of the elections, Mr. Le Pen. She is also, Marine Le Pen, he is also rather leading this effort to ensure that Muslims' anti-immigration, anti-Islamist narrative is taken care of. And also Macron himself has had a very bad history in 2022 of leading, the anti-Islamist acts as well. So do you see that this is also political motivation in order to ensure that their nationalist agenda is upheld?
Yes, I think this is definitely having connection with the political dynamics and political consideration of each and every country, whether it is France or Scandinavian countries. And there is also this fact that the immigration which is taking place in all these countries and the coming of new people to those countries definitely having impact upon the life of the people. So in order to attract the attention of the people and to address their miseries and the things which affected after the arrival of these immigrants, so definitely then they raise certain slogans which attract the voters. And this is a very attractive slogan for the people, for the common people, in their favor. And secondly, there is also a factor which they exploit properly and appropriately, and that is the behavior of the Muslims and the policies of different Muslim organizations elsewhere in the world. So, and that depict them in the world is terrorist, and that the religion of Islam is not the religion, is the religion of terrorism, and wherever there are Muslims, so there are terrorism. So if these Muslims are coming to their countries, so definitely it will affect their values, their culture, by these Muslims. And so they try to create a fear against the Muslims and then exploit those feelings in their favor.
Right, absolutely. Also, we know that earlier we were talking about nationalism. We've seen that in New Zealand there was attack as well. In India, there's consistent attack against the Muslims, particularly as well. And in the U.S. as well, we know that their government, the U.S. government, has invoked the Secret Act as well in order to ensure to continue the spying against Muslims and in the aftermath of the 9/11. So this has been going on for quite some time as well. Now let's come on to the role of media. We know of the CNN effect, which basically talks about having an impact on the policy, politics, and of course the economic policy making of the country as well. So the CNN in itself, if it shows, or the large major mainstream channels, if they show an entire Muslim narrative subliminally or in a very small matters, in a very small amount, Islamophobic incidences as well in subtle ways. So will this have an impact on the policy makers? And if it does, what is going to be the result?
Yes, you are right that the role of media is enormous in the Islamophobia. There are reports, there are research conducted on the issue which shows that when the common people were asked about the Muslims and Islam and then Islamophobia, so on the one hand they were having a lot of fears about the Muslims and prejudices against the Muslims. But on the other hand, when they were asked that, what they knew about the Muslims and Islam, and it was found that they had very little knowledge and information about the Muslims and Islam. But their view was formatted by the media. And again, this is very sorry that the Muslims do not understand the means through which they can communicate to the people the message of Islam. And so whatever the knowledge they are having, it is not of a substantial manner to communicate the message of Islam to the world. So whatever they gathered, it is definitely from the media, which is to which they are easily accessible, and definitely all these media reports and media representation, videos and clips, then it impact those who are sitting in the policy making bodies.
Right.
And so then they made policies regarding the Muslims and other countries outside
Absolutely.
their own country.
Moreover, Dr. Abdul, talking about media, we know that currently in the wake of the Ukrainian crisis as well, we have seen the statements of so many journalists themselves who are supposed to be impartial. They've been stating that this isn't a place, while talking about Ukraine, they said that this isn't a place like Afghanistan or Iraq. This is a relatively civilized country. And in another statement, they said that I see people with blonde hair and blue eyes being killed every day, and that hurts me. So do you see a clear hypocrisy on the level of the Western journalists and the Western policymakers and itself the other stakeholders as well, where they differentiate between them versus us, and them being the Muslims?
Yes, this is quite clear to the world that in fact the Muslims and the Muslim countries are depicted in their media and their literature, their scholarship, different from them. And there is this feeling and understanding among them that they are superior to the others, and they include us in the others. So then they make a comparison of us and them as you stated. So this is quite strange for them, that the region which they are depicted is uncivilized and terrorist and barbarians, for example, Afghanistan and Middle East, where the war is going on and people are killing each other, and how then it happened in Ukraine, which according to them is a civilized one. So
absolutely,
this is how the power. The place where power is located, then how they depict the others.
Absolutely. You very rightly and interestingly mentioned how the place of power, they're coming from a place of power. And of course, we know that the reason for colonialism in itself was social Darwinism, where they state that they are better than the others and hence they have a right and they have the duty to teach it to the others as well. Can we see it in the aggressive secularism that's being impacted, outrightly being, seeped into the society as well and trying to impact the Muslims all around the world? The aggressive secularism.
Yes, of course. This is having impact upon the Muslims, and it is targeting the Muslims and Islam, whether it is the secular element or sometimes even the moderate element. So they have the same thing in their mind. For example, as in the beginning I mentioned the concept of good and evil. So
right.
This is something which is sometime in which they are indoctrinated. So they are good and there are evil, and there is always a fight between good and evil since the inception of the world, and they always kept themselves on the side of right and the other as on the side of evil.
Absolutely, of course, and it's very important to be able to understand each other and try to respect each other's boundaries and cultures and, of course, differences as well, because that's how we're going to try to be able to counter Islamophobia. Lastly, Dr. Abdul, let's talk about Pakistan's role in countering Islamophobia as well. Of course, we know that the March 15th has been dubbed as a day to combat Islamophobia, and that has been due to a lot of effort from Pakistan. And how do you see the efforts of Pakistan along with the other Muslim countries as well, especially in terms of OIC effort and others as well, to try to ensure that there is a recognition that Islamophobia exists?
Yes, the case of Pakistan is special among the Muslim countries because of its strength, its population, its geographical location, and of course carrying the atomic weapons. So in that case, then Pakistan is having responsibility more than some other countries, some other Muslim countries. And I think in this respect, the government of Pakistan and Pakistan played a role in the past in order to sensitize the issue among the Muslim states and then pursuing them to adopt a policy against this Islamophobia and work hard to respond this challenge. And as you mentioned that recently Pakistan contact different Muslim countries, the important Muslim countries, for example, Turkey, for example, Malaysia, and try to unite hands along with them and communicate the message to the world that this is not good, not only for the Muslims, but for the entire world as well. As the world is going to be united and to work collectively for the noble objectives. So it is not good to be in conflict with among ourselves, whether Muslims and non-Muslims are on the basis of some other entities.
Right. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Abdul Rauf, and talking to us regarding the Islamophobia in the world, especially in the Scandinavian and the Western countries as well. Of course, we know that in India in itself, our neighborhood, has a lot of Islamophobia, but of course, that's a story that needs a separate day for that entirely. Now, let's talk about our second story, a very I wouldn't call it a good day, but I would call it a day where justice has been served. I hope the justice has been served, even though we cannot bring the dead back, but we know that this was a day that Pakistan won in its courts as well, won the fight against the extremism that could seep into Pakistan even further and destroy the social net of Pakistan. Of course, I'm talking about the awarding of 6 death penalties to the killers of Priyantha Kumara, a Sri Lankan who was working at the Rajco company in Sialkot, and he was killed brutally. He was lynched and then set ablaze on December the 3rd in 2021 and left a very dark mark on Pakistan. However, Pakistan had to ensure that they stepped up their game, and they did, So they awarded 6 death penalties as well. And not just that, the trial court also announced a death sentence on 2 counts to these 6 convicts. I'm going to name all of these 6 people because this is a time to name and shame those who were involved in this heinous crime. Mr. Taimur, Abdul Rahman, Muhammad Irshad, Ali Hasnain, Abu Talha and Muhammad Humair were the ones who were involved in the lynching and setting ablaze of Priyantha Kumara, who was, of course, our guest in Pakistan, and they treated their guests so ruthlessly as well. And then 9 convicts have been awarded life imprisonment along with a payment of 200,000 fine each and 200,000 fine as a compensation to the bereaved family as well. And not just that, 72 convicts have also been sentenced to 2 years rigorous imprisonment each on 3 counts and 1 year rigorous imprisonment for 2 counts as well. And one has been awarded 5 years, one acquitted on the charges as well. This was, of course, conducted by the Anti-Terrorism Court. Let's take a look at this report and come back with more.
The gruesome murder of Sri Lankan factory manager Priyantha Kumara over blasphemy allegations by an unruly mob in Sialkot jolted the nation. The vigilante violence against 48-year-old Sri Lankan citizens sparked widespread demands of speedy justice, and Government of Pakistan vowed to bring all perpetrators to justice. Religious leaders, civil society and politicians across the spectrum condemned the murder, while civil society groups held small demonstrations against the killing of Priyantha Kumara. Sialkot police constituted 10 raiding teams to arrest the culprits, and government vigilante monitored the investigations. Rights group Amnesty International called for an impartial inquiry into the killing of Special Anti-Terror Court was established to speed up the justice in this high-profile case. The Anti-Terrorism Court completed the trial of the case in Kot Lakhpat jail, and a total of 89 men had been indicted in the murder case, of which 9 are minors. Among these, the court has awarded life imprisonment to 9, while 72 convicts have been awarded 2 years of jail time. Rajco Industries pledged to pay Kumara's family his salary for the next 10 years. And Sialkot Chamber of Commerce and Industry disbursed funds worth $100,000 to the bereaved family. The thorough investigation against the culprits and awarding punishment with full severity of law sets a precedent to curb such incidents in the future.
Priyantha, who was a 49-year-old working in Pakistan on the pretense of having a good economic situation here in Pakistan, an opportunity over here, and all his, of course, 3 brothers were here as well. All the 3 brothers were working in Pakistan, and of course we know that the heartbreaking statements of his brother, which said that we are unable to tell our mother this because we cannot tell her the reason of what had happened. And of course he also stated that she's 80 years old, she's diabetic, we cannot tell her. Of course, he has a wife, left behind a wife and 2 children, a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old. Of course, the RAUF company is giving them compensation for 10 years, but that is a story for another time. We have been joined by the guest barrister Ambreen Qureshi, who's a human rights lawyer. Welcome to PTV World.
Thank you. Thank you.
Barrister Qureshi, let's talk about how important this decision of the Pakistani Anti-Terrorism Court was, the trial court was, in order to ensure that their justice had been served.
Absolutely. This was something that not only Pakistan, people of Pakistan, but the entire world was looking at. This trial, which was done under very, with a lot of security around it, was very important for Pakistan to show that they will not in any way tolerate extremism, hatred towards religious minorities. And I appreciate it. But then again, I think we have a long way to go. There has to be a lot of things that we need to look at. For instance, the police involvement. The police did not come on time. Had they come on time, they would have been able to do something and make sure that he would have survived or could have survived. So these are the things that we need to look at. There is a collective failure overall, if you see, but this judgment is a good judgment, and I hope we make sure that such instances never happen in Pakistan, and that is why the convictions and the penalties that have been given, they are much, much higher, and they have not even left an individual who, after the incident, went on YouTube and hailed the incident. So he's also given 1 year imprisonment and 10,000 fine. So this shows that we are moving towards the right direction.
Right, we're moving towards the right direction. The entire civil society, including the religious scholars as well as the other civil society, came together to talk about how heinous this incident was. Of course, we know that the courts have had their audio-visual data as well. Do you think that now the courts of Pakistan are equipped to ensure that they are able to conduct cases quickly and also with the help of the modern age and the technology?
Well, I hope so, Tayyaba. I hope so, because apart from the fact that you have this new technology which helps the judges figure out what's actually happened, they see the visuals. But then I think there is a lot of pressure, not only from the news channels and as well as the social media and internationally as well, on the judiciary to ensure that the trial is done on time, all the evidence is looked into, and justice is done, you see. So I think that has significantly changed how the judicial system works. So I think that also has something to do with this.
Right, Ambreen, let's talk a little about the blasphemy laws as well. We know that about 84 people have been killed on the blame of blasphemy, and of course this has not been proved in the courts either. Do we need to revisit our blasphemy laws?
Tayyaba, I think yes, of course we do, but I think that society does not overnight starts this extremism and hatred. There's a particular, section of our society which nurtures hatred, and that is the cause of all these instances. These so-called fake allegations of blasphemy shows that there is a section of our society who is not reprimanded, who is not scared of what the law says, and obviously most important thing, that the blasphemy law does not even talk about false accusation. That needs to change. We need to make sure that there is a proper system in place which is going to look into how these people make these false accusations, what are the penalties that could happen, that could be given to them, and this way there is a deterrence in the society. So there is no deterrence. So anyone can just come, misuse a law, and then the result is in front of you, in form of mob lynching, and this has happened for years in Pakistan. So
Absolutely.
That is something we need to look into and work, together. All the police, like I've said, overall, if you see from what has happened in the past, it's a collective failure. It's a collective failure by the police, who slack, who do not do things on time as they're supposed to, by the judicial process, they slack as well. But then, to be honest, I think when a blasphemy case comes, there is a apprehension, there is some sort of apprehension that is there, not only for the judges but also for the lawyers to take up such cases where someone has been accused of blasphemy. So all of this has to, be looked into and worked upon by all stakeholders, and only then we'll be able to say there is a change.
Right, of course, we know, Ambreen, that Junaid Hafiz, a prominent person who was working in his hometown as well, he was blamed on blasphemy charges. He has been arrested. So many other people have been arrested. Mashal Khan in 2017 was lynched to death as well, and a Christian couple was also lynched to death. How are we going to change our society to accept the differences of opinion?
Oh, well, that'd probably take me a day to kind of see what things that could be done. But I think the first thing is, one, I do believe in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, they have made a specific committee which deals with extremism, and they had a session yesterday as well. Such kind of committees, have to be made, or such kind of organizations, on behalf of the government and even by private individuals, need to be made to kind of understand, one, how in that area things are, how people are reacting to such situations, and then informing them. I think majority of the people do not have access to TV. They do not have access to what the law says. I mean, simple, if you see Mr. Kumara's case, what has happened? He's been burnt. Now, if Islam doesn't teach us that. Under no circumstances can burn a body, may that be of a Muslim or a non-Muslim. So these things have nothing to do with Islam. This is something that is, I think there is some sort of mental block that is there against the minorities, and for that you need awareness.
Ambreen, and not just burning the body, killing in itself is not allowed in Islam at all.
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. But I was talking in context of how they have misused Islam over this, and how bad an image of Pakistan has gone across the world, and how people are taking us as a nation because of this. But then again, because of this judgment, I believe that that will be appreciated. And again, we need to move further. We need to take steps to ensure nothing like that ever happens to our foreigners who come in, or our minorities at large. Give them their equal rights under the Constitution to begin with, and make sure they have equal access to education, to jobs and everything, and maybe that could change things for them.
That's very interesting. Could you a little bit and very briefly highlight the rights of those who are working in Pakistan, the foreigners who are working in Pakistan?
I mean, foreigners, any foreigner who is working in Pakistan, all laws that are applicable to any citizen, that's also applicable to him. So we need to make sure that, one, they should be protected, and secondly, they need to be having full access to lawyers or to police officers. And I think that is something they are now working on since that incident, to not only make sure that the relevant embassies have the data, but also the local police and local stakeholders who are there to protect such foreigners are there, and they come on time. You see, the main problem here was this lack of the police. Had the police come on time, this incident would have not happened. So all these things have to be looked into, and they need to make sure, the government of Pakistan need to make sure that they're not only looking after the foreigners, but also the minorities, at large in Pakistan.
Absolutely. The minorities have to be taken care of as well. And of course, the foreigners have to be taken care of. Lastly, Ambreen, let's talk a little about the protection of the judges and the witnesses who went, and of course, witness as well. There are about 89, I believe, people who went to witness as well. What is their security measures? What will be the protection that will be provided to the judges who took this decision?
I mean, if you see this particular case here, the judge was asked, he was requested that, the hearings of the trial would happen in Kota Lakpat, jail for that particular reason, because of the amount of, threats that were apparently there or would have been there because of the, sensitivity of the case. So this is something that has happened. The witnesses were also protected. But then can this happen in each and every case? No. Can this happen for a longer period of time? No. But they need to kind of, if there is repercussions, if there is reprimand, if we deter them, only then they'll be able to not only understand that they need to respect a human life, their holy places, but also the people who are in that position to decide who has done wrong and who has done right, and then give punishment accordingly. When you don't have that, the whole structure breaks down, and that is why you see that not only the victims, falling for, or facing such a sort of victimization, the judge who is, in a much higher place, he himself is facing the same sort of threat. And you have seen in the past of judges, unfortunately, being murdered just because they've taken up a blasphemy case.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you so much for joining us, Barrister Ambreen Qureshi, human rights lawyer, and telling us about, of course, in detail, the outcomes of this Supreme Court ruling, or rather the trial court ruling as well, and of course, what we can do to ensure that this extremism does not prevail in the society. We do not want to become like those countries who violate the basic rights of the minorities and the foreigners of the country. We want to be a prosperous country, and I believe for that we have to look into our own selves as well. Now, let's talk about the three top stories, rather three news items in this show of the Newsroom. Let's talk a little about the Palestinian-Israeli issue. Currently, we of course know that this has been going on for quite some time. 2 weeks back, the Israeli forces, they came into the compound, the Al-aqsa mosque compound, and the sensitive Jerusalem holy site for all the three religions. And of course, this came at a time when Passover, Easter, and Ramzan is taking place at the same time. And unfortunately, the Israeli Defense Forces have been not just murdering the Palestinians, but also injuring them and lynching them and also beating them in front of their families and their little children as well. The new developments in this is that Israel has carried out its first airstrikes on the Gaza Strip in the holy month of Ramadan after the weekend of violence as well. We know last year 11 days of war, 11 days of violence rather. I wouldn't even call it a war. I would call it constant perpetration of violence against a minority, unarmed community, against civilians. Civilians did not take up the arm. The Israeli Defense Forces took up the arm. So it's not exactly a war. This is an unproportional response. And hence Israel has been conducting genocide, many say, against the Palestinian people, not just in West Bank, but also in East Jerusalem, also in Gaza Strip. And unfortunately, this has been going on for quite some time. And we know that diplomatic sources, they've said that the United Nations Security Council is going to hold a session on Tuesday, that is today, to discuss this spike in violence as well. And also similar violence in Jerusalem around the last year, time last year was also triggered as well. The history of Palestine-Israel has been going on for a very long time since the state of Israel, the fictional, I would call it, state of Israel came into creation in 1947. Unfortunately, this also came, the fact that the difference of their opinion went into violence, and then this violence has been one-sided by the Israeli Defense Forces, who were given a home by the Palestinians, and now their homes are being snatched by the people of Israel as well. Unfortunately, we have been seeing a lot of struggle by the people of the civil society as well as diplomatic efforts, but not much is being done because the Israeli lobby is very strong. And I'm not talking about the Jewish lobby, I'm talking about the Israeli lobby, which of course includes all the different religions who are staying in Israel currently. Now let's talk about the other story and go towards India. Of course, we know that a viral video came up in India on WhatsApp where they put the saffron flag on top of a mosque, and 50 people came out to protest against that. And then there was of course, a violence that ensued, clashes that ensued after that. And we've seen that in response to the protest and in response to the violence, the police took an action and they went on to arrest the person who made this video and who disseminated this video as well. And that is when the people of the Hindu majority community in India, the extremist Hindu majority community, they came up and they started chanting slogans against Muslims. And not just that, and this has been happening in the Hubli on the north of Bengaluru, and also in Karnataka as well, and not just that, in Delhi as well, because the religious holidays, festivities of Hindus are going on, and when they came outside a mosque, they had swords and guns, and the guns were fired as well. The gunshots were fired. Many people were injured as well. And after that, the police arrested 88 people. And unfortunately, after the arrest, these continue. The violence continue. We, of course, know 53 people died back in 2020 in the Delhi riots. And right now, we continue to see these violence going on to a much more larger extent. And this could, as the human rights activist says, the Genocide Watch chairperson himself has said that this could lead towards the genocide of the Muslims as well. And lastly, let's talk about another story, and that is the oncoming to Pakistan of Miss Ilhan Omar. Miss Ilhan Omar is, of course, expected to arrive in Islamabad today on Tuesday. She is a Democrat member from Minnesota as well. And of course, we know that she is a 37-year-old who has been, of course, a Somali descent, and she has been very much supporting Pakistan's stance on the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And not just that, she has been supporting the Kashmiris themselves, because these Kashmiri people need a voice, and she has been raising this voice for them in the US Congress. There are only 2 women Muslims who are present in the Congress currently. Of course, we know that Ilhan Omar is one of them, and she has been, of course, talking very strongly about the Indian Army's act in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir as well. And of course, she is the one who fled the civil war in Somalia, and she would better know what the people of Kashmir are currently undergoing and the atrocities they're currently under impression and under the pressure of as well. And we welcome Ms. Ilhan Omar to Pakistan. We hope she has a good trip and a very productive trip as well. This was the top news. We discussed Islamophobia. We also discussed the Priyanka Kumara's ruling, and we also discussed the other news items as well. Thank you for watching Newsroom. Stay tuned for more. Let's talk more tomorrow.